Okay, so I'm really delighted to have two of our clients here who have been supporting their son throughout the program, and I'll introduce them to you in just a moment, but we have some incredible data that we're excited to share with you. Frederick went from the ninth percentile in reading to the 61st percentile. Phonological awareness was from the 33rd or 33% accurate to 83% accurate, and spelling went from the 12th percentile to the 50th percentile, with his good phonetic equivalence, like what he was able to spell phonetically, being far superior to that as well, like the 99th percentile. So we've just been thrilled to see the growth and the change for this sweet and brilliant young man. I hope we get to talk about how amazingly brilliant he is. And I think it's also really helpful to hear from mom and dad, like what it actually looked like, the the good, the bad, the ugly, and how it used to be versus how it is now. Because I think that those stories are really valuable. So thank you so much to both of you for being here.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah, it's
Would
great.
you mind just kind of giving us, so tell us more about what it looked like for Frederick before we met.
Um, Beforehand, he couldn't read. It took us a while to realize that. We thought it was maybe a COVID delay,
Sure.
and because he'd missed some of the preschool stuff with lockdowns. Um, but about halfway through first grade, we began to suspect that something was really wrong. Um, and so we started looking into what some of the possible issues might be and realized that it was possibly dyslexia. Uh, and he would get spelling tests back that were 50% wrong, 70% wrong, um, just week after week. And it was really discouraging for him and confusing for us because we had read to him from the time he was very, very little. Every night we read to him. And so it's just baffling why he wasn't picking this up. And so that's where it all sort of began, was what's wrong, and eventually isolating it down to, we think it's dyslexia, and then what can we do about it?
Yeah, there's one kind of poignant moment for me when we were uh, back before this started, the program started. We were at one of our local parades here in town, and they were throwing out candy, and he wasn't interested in anything except Sour Patch Kids. And we asked, well, why? What's so special about Sour Patch Kids? And he said, well, when kids get their spelling tests back and they get 100%, the teacher would always tape a piece of Sour Patch Kids on the top. And they said, well, did you ever get that? And he said, no. And it seemed like at that moment, he had just accepted that there was this kind of two-tier world with those who can spell and get rewarded. And that was not, and he was not in that world, you know. So his self-esteem, you can just see the self-esteem even at this early age.
For sure.
Uh, yeah, he was in a different class. I mean, and he was
Wow.
aware of it. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I think you're touching on something that's really in the research, they'll say that self-concept can be developed as early as 7, where you realize that, like, these are the things that I have, and these are the things that other people have, and this is how I am different. And so sometimes that can be the moment where you start to then compare yourself, and then you're feeling maybe less than, or you're feeling bad. And so you were seeing evidence of that beginning for him.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's incredibly difficult. And so talk to me more about, like, literacy wise. I know you said the spelling tests were really challenging, but you've also mentioned before, like, reading was incredibly difficult. Will you talk to me a little bit more about what that looked like?
Um, well, one of the things they do here in our area is sight words. And so they would time them on how fast they could do sight words. And his were always very, very slow and very, very bad. Um, and so I would sit down with him and I'd be like doing what we know now as decoding, and I'd be working through the sounds with him, and it just he couldn't hear some of them, or he just didn't understand what we were asking him to do. And so he couldn't read single words in isolation. He couldn't read a book at all. But his reading comprehension has been and is very, very strong. He can understand things far above his grade level. And so he loved being read to, including these very advanced books. I know Roger had read to him The Trumpet of the Swan
Wow.
by E.B. White when he was, gosh, late kindergarten, early first grade, and he understood it and he loved it. And so we knew he was capable of a much higher level. And it was just baffling to us why he couldn't and wouldn't read. He started to refuse to read.
Which is difficult in and of itself. And I mean, I think you're highlighting one of the things that parents come to is this discrepancy between my child's incredible intelligence and then this unexpected difficulty as it pertains to language, whether it's spelling or decoding or, really anything that has to do with language-based skills. Like we're struggling here, and it's visible, but it's so different from every other thing that we're doing. That's really, really amazing. So I mean, I think it's worth talking about his gifts. Like what are some of the things that are incredible and superpowers about him that you've seen from the time he was little?
Well, he has a phenomenal ability to deliver monologues and these long narratives about anything. But
His imaginary world.
we go for hikes, and he'll just be talking the whole time about the house he has in Italy or something, and how far away from the beach it is and what kind of plumbing it has. And he just keeps talking about, I mean, he can sustain a narrative for as long as you will let him. And it just keeps spinning out. And sometimes you ask a question trying to throw him off to make him realize, oh, he's just making all this up, but he has an instant answer for whatever sort of question you throw at him, like, how far from the beach are you in your house? And he says, oh, about a mile, just like that, without ever having to think about it, And
Wow.
so that is amazing to me. Neither
Yep.
Patricia and I are great talkers, but he can tell a story out of nothing, And
Wow. And creativity, it sounds like galore.
Yeah, he's got a lot of creativity. He's a very gifted drawer. He can draw and has been able to do so since he was quite young. Just things that are beyond my ability, and he's still so young. It's exciting to imagine what he will achieve. So that's one that he's had. Another one is his fine motor skills. He is really able to manipulate objects, fine objects, and his spatial awareness is pretty remarkable as well. How things fit together. So.
And, I think it's worth mentioning that we know the superpowers of a brain with dyslexia. So a lot of times we talk about the things that are hard because they are, like I'm really struggling to recognize this letter and put it together in my brain with a sound, or my brain is really having a difficult time even hearing all of the sounds in a word. But at the same time, I have these exceptional gifts in creativity and in spatial thinking and in lateral thinking and being able to see the whole picture that I think, just really offers a cool life and opportunity. But what's really important to us, and it's clearly been important to you, is to get the skills in literacy to match the intelligence so that we can be doing all of the things that we really want to in life. So, as you started to see his skills change, what were some of the exciting things that he was able to have access to now that he maybe didn't before?
Well, I mean, he's always been fascinated with books, but he wasn't reading them. He would just be staring at the pictures.
Sure.
And I mean, I don't know exactly what he was looking at, but he couldn't read, but he would sit there with books and turn the pages and be fascinated by the drawings in them. And now he can read.
Yeah.
That's,
Which is remarkable. And it's I can appreciate that sometimes, if it's been an adverse experience and, everything that had to do with schooling was negative, that it can take a minute before you actually learn to love and appreciate reading, but being able to do it and actually show up to the table with the skills to do that is incredible.
Yeah, he's not to the point where he loves reading yet. He does still resist
Yeah.
on some of that. And I don't know that I blame him. I'm not exactly seeking out opportunities to do advanced math myself.
Yep.
So, I mean, I'm capable of it, but I don't enjoy it.
Yep.
Some people do. And he might be the opposite at some point where he enjoys advanced math but doesn't seek out reading. And
Yeah.
so it is better and it is continuing to improve. And as we continue to work on it, it does nudge itself along, which is encouraging.
Absolutely. And I mean, when you look at where he kind of started and some of the data, it's not atypical. I mean, to have a reading score at the ninth percentile, to have a spelling score at the 12th percentile, it's typical when we also have a phonological awareness score that's 33% accurate. And so it's hard to have a really high reading score or really high spelling score when the brain is really having a difficult time even hearing all of the sounds in the word, let alone manipulating those accurately. And so, as we saw that number shift. I mean, by the time he was done, he was 83% accurate, which is significantly different than 33% accurate. Not surprisingly, we also saw the rise in his reading and spelling data too, to jump into the 61st percentile or the 50th percentile. So they do absolutely go hand in hand. And to have the brain actually be able to hear all of the sounds in the language and be able to manipulate those, takes them out, puts them in, all of that is a mental Olympics that is very much a struggle. So I guess tell me more about what that process was like in real time. Like, did you see changes or like what did you notice as he was going through that?
Oh, it was so slow. It was so slow. It was really a severe case. And so it took a long time to lay that foundation. And then once it was there to build on that and to help increase the confidence and the understanding. And so we'd work through some of the modules and he wasn't necessarily ready on some of them. And so we would move forward a little. But when we went back to, double check to make sure something, it would be there. And so like, for example, there's one where you delete a sound and a word is magnet and you're supposed to take away the N and get maggot. And when we first were working through, he really couldn't do that, those middle sounds. But by the time we got to the end into module 8 and I went back to check that one, it was there and he could delete that sound.
Amazing.
So that was a big excitement. Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah, I
absolutely.
think she says it was very slow, but it was also very a battle. I mean, he did not look forward to sitting down, and he would do everything he could to avoid it, and still does, and often
Yep.
gets um, distracted or willingly creates distractions. Or
Yep.
if somebody walks through the room, then he gets upset and says, "I can't do this." And so it was slow, but it was a real battle to do it, and she did it every day. Every day she did it.
Yeah. It
Which
took a lot of perseverance. Yeah.
for sure. And I think that that's just honest, like it's one of those things where it would be awesome if the child came to the table like, wow, I'm so excited. And sometimes that happens and other times it does not, like you have other things that are going on, whether that's, like I have already built a story around what it means to be reading or what it means to be doing any kind of literacy work. And I've already told myself that I do not like it. And so that can be a really strong feeling that takes time to really try to shift. And so I think what's powerful is that you were still able to massively shift the data even though he gave you a run for your money me probably every day of like, okay, mom, how can I try to get out of it this time? But you did an amazing job and absolutely shifted what he's able to do. And I think that that's just an incredible testament to your love for him and your commitment, and absolutely, as you said, the consistency. Because oftentimes what happens is like, okay, I'm got this battle, and now I'm gonna let go, or I'm going to give up because I'm tired of having to do this with you. So I'm just going to take a break because maybe I need that. And I think, that's certainly not helpful to the overall plasticity and repetition and change that we're looking to build. So kudos to you for that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is easier now. I mean, he is finally starting to shift in that attitude. But it's not easy.
Yeah,
Uh,
right.
but it does get easier as they start to see the changes and the benefits. And one of the great moments was when he said, I am a reader. And
Wow.
I overheard him say it to somebody else. So at that point, that he has changed his own view of himself, where he says, well, I am a reader. And so that was a great moment.
I would say so, yeah. And he's still little. So he's still growing and has the capacity to grow. And I think that that's the big message here, is that even though you might have a severe case of dyslexia, it does not mean that it cannot shift. And okay, so maybe reading print at all was a difficult thing, or writing letters at all was a difficult thing. But to shift that to like, yeah, here I am, and I'm reading and I'm writing sentences, and maybe I don't love it, but like I'm here and doing it. It's huge.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And one of the things that we're supposed to do at the beginning of the program is have them set goals for themselves. And one of his goals was to read to his younger brother. And I actually have a picture of him reading The Cat in the Hat to his younger brother. So
Wow.
it was a pretty nice moment.
Yeah. I would say so. Deservedly so. That's awesome. So, I mean, do you have, for other families that are perhaps in the same situation where they have a brilliant child who is really, really struggling for language, is there something that you learned on this journey that you wished that you would have known, or that, something that you would like to share with others that might be on the same path as you were?
I think maybe part of it is trust the process. Um, it, it I heard some people describe it as voodoo. It does seem a little strange, that this is actually having an effect, but it does. It really does. And sticking with it will yield results. You have to have some faith and some patience, and trust the science, and it will come through eventually. The more severe it is, it will take more time, and you just have to hold on to that hope, and it will be okay.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think Roger, did you want to share anything else? I didn't mean to cut you off.
Well, I guess one thing for me that's just been so interesting is how, well, just something that we've always taken for granted, that reading, and then you realize, whoa, this is a very complicated process within the brain. And it's not just reading, so many other aspects of his life. I mean, like he was just inability to hear a rhyme, which just, I couldn't fathom that when I discovered that he did not know that part of the dyslexic brain is that it does not recognize sound. I mean, and you would give him a very simple nursery rhyme, and he could give you a paraphrase of it, but he would miss the rhymes, and they meant nothing. Or we had him I signed him up for a music program, Let's Play Music, and he just couldn't. He didn't have any musical sense of timing or anything like that. We did the whole course. And I remember the teacher at the end just saying, he doesn't he just doesn't get it, or something like that. Uh, or still like tying his shoes, tying knots and left and right. And that's so many aspects of his day-to-day reality, not just reading, but just the way he perceives things and different skills and lack of certain skills that you take for granted. Um, that was just very illuminating to me and fascinating at the same time.
No, I 100%. It's reading is a skill of the brain, and you're right when you say that when we can do it automatically, that we kind of assume that that's the way that it goes for most people. And so what we know is that explicit instruction and helping all kids to hear sounds is a good idea for instruction and practice, but it is absolutely essential for someone who has dyslexia. Like, you cannot do a sight word plan and like not teach sound symbol relationship and expect the child to be successful. Like, those two things do not go together. Patricia, like, yes.
Yeah, it was a disaster. Every time they came home, it was like, okay, here's another disaster. Yeah.
It's difficult. And, I think you're not going to change the way that the brain is responding to those sight words by learning more sight words or memorizing more sight words. Like, what you really have to do is get at the root cause, which is the brain's inability to hear the sounds, break down the sounds, and then actually start to build sounds back together. And all of those things are unique processes in the brain that sometimes take a lot of repetitions to really get solidified, especially the more difficult that the case is, but it can be done. And, you can certainly teach a child who does not hear any sounds in language to read and spell. And you're right when you say, like, sometimes it requires more patience, but it can be done. And it absolutely, the methodology that we're using, I think, has to be carefully looked at.
Yeah, I recite words for him was like asking somebody to memorize license plates. It just, there was no connection. There was no reason. There was no rhyme to any of it. It was just completely random. And now there is a base to work with and an understanding. And so that I think really changes how he perceives words.
For sure. For sure. And so, like, what would you say are some of the things now that he's doing that are like remarkably different from what it looked like when he started?
Uh, I think one of the big things is just his awareness of words around him. And so like he wouldn't even read like road signs. There was nothing there. I mean, he was never going to get a driver's license at that rate because he couldn't even understand what a road sign said. And now he sees words in his environment and he'll say, "Oh, what about that? What does this mean?" Or that says that. And so he'll point things out that before was just not even. It might as well have been Sanskrit. I mean, it didn't matter.
That's awesome.
He includes a lot more words in his drawings. And that one that just this past weekend he drew a skull and crossbones, and then underneath it he put toxic, which I thought just I admired him for even just I mean he didn't even stop, he just spelled it, but he spelled it Toksick,
Okay.
toxic, which I thought was really
You got all the sounds there, buddy.
yeah, and and just that sick at the end, like you could hear it. Oh, that's a brilliant way to spell the word, and
Yeah.
but he felt just so comfortable about just adding words there, and confident, you
Good.
know, or he likes to draw ships and he'll put the names of the ship along the side. And
Yeah, he'll write stories. They're mostly pictures, but they will have some sentences around them to sort of give context and stuff. And so he does add more words and create books and things. So although the books are sometimes backwards, he does sometimes do the books from right to left instead of left to right. But whatever.
But I think what's amazing about it is that he's still little and his skills are going to continue to grow. And so if he's got the confidence to start putting those things now, I mean, we're just going to keep adding momentum and growth to this young man who already has an incredible storytelling capacity, an incredible creative brain. I mean, imagine what that could look like when he feels like, yeah, everything that I'm going to do is going to be written out, and I have the ability to express myself and my amazing ideas. Like, holy cow, the sky's the limit for him.
Yeah, he's very much into engineering. And so I'm pretty excited to see what he does with that. It's a field that you need to be able to read, and he wasn't going to be able to do it unless he could read. And now all of that is possible or becoming possible. It's not there
Yep.
yet.
Well, and I think the more that he builds the momentum and the muscle, he's reading now and he's got the capacity to decode words. I mean, difficult words. He is above average in his ability to decode words. And so now, like, building the stamina to do that and wanting to do that is maybe the next horizon. But, we can continue to grow in that. And I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
Good. Is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you would like to share?
I think the support. We had a lot of support. We went to a lot of the Q&As, and even though I didn't necessarily say something every time, I was listening every time. And so the support of others who are, talking about difficulties or successes, talking about strategies, and just making sure that you're doing it right, gaining your own confidence in yourself, in teaching others. Just that, all of that support really, really is very helpful. You're not in it alone. And that's great.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it. Yeah, you were tremendous at coming to the calls and getting support. And it's an asset that you have available to you. Not everybody takes advantage of it, but I would highly recommend it.
Yes, absolutely. Because just sometimes you run out of ideas how to help. And so just listening to other people talk about how they've navigated something very similar,
Yep.
I would come away feeling more encouraged and resolved and inspired and able to take on somebody who was fighting back all the time. And so that was really helpful.
Well, absolutely, because I think, it is a journey, when you're trying to shift how someone is responding to language, it's a journey from point A to point B. And I think anytime that you can not travel that alone is a better way to go. And so I'm really grateful that you felt loved and encouraged and supported throughout that process, because I think that's how we get through anything that's tricky, is that we go together. That's awesome. Well, thank you sincerely to both of you for being here. I can't tell you enough how proud I am of your continued support and persistence, even though it was not always easy. I mean, you did such a beautiful job at massively shifting him from a boy who struggled to look at letters and recognize a sound to a reader and speller. He may not love it, but he is reading and spelling and continuing to grow every single day. So I give you all the credit in the world for showing up for him and believing in his capacity.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for the program. It's made every difference.
It has.
Well,
And I mean, this is just kind of an aside, but it's made me a better teacher. I mean, I'm a professor, and I teach a lot of film, and I've noticed that uh, some of the comments that students make, they're brilliant, and they see things that I don't see, and then I find out they're dyslexic, and they don't write well, they need extra time. But and they're so grateful when someone just recognizes that.
absolutely. And the empathy to understand how brilliant and what a superpower it is. And so I can't say that enough times, like dyslexia is a superpower. And we, like our goal is to try to get the literacy skills to be, at and above where the intelligence is, because most children with dyslexia are average or above average intelligence. And so they have, like I said, spatial thinking, lateral thinking, creativity, interpersonal skills. I mean, you name it. And there's physical evidence of how the brain lights up in a beautiful way that other people do not have access to. And so I think leveraging that and having the understanding and the ability to kind of lean in to those skills
Exactly.
is just incredible. So it's a diagnosis, but it's not a curse, it's a gift.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's well put. Yeah.
Yeah, but it is also difficult to deal with language. And so, the more that you can do to actually shift the way that the brain is responding, it
Yeah.
makes it all possible to just like achieve the best. So I just am grateful to both of you. Thank you for being here, and I appreciate you telling your story.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Okay, guys. Thanks again.
Okay. All right.